Got it. All right. How's it going? My name is Chad, the alcoholic. I'm with the Bridges of Meaning Hub channel, also with the Chad the Alcoholic channel. And today I wanted to have a discussion with the one and only Mr. America Lefebvre. And we wanted to I wanted to have more of a personal discussion, one that's I don't really do well in like esoteric stuff. So what I really wanted to do is just kind of have a conversation with you, Mark, and hear your story and stuff. So thanks for doing this with me. And I was kind of rushing around. I actually don't own a Zoom account that's paid for. So look at that. So I had to find a Zoom account to use, and that kind of didn't go as well as I had hoped it would. So I'm kind of running around like a chicken with my head cut off. So how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Chad. It's great to be with you. I'm happy to chat with you. And yeah, we had a little problem with Zoom, but Manuel Post has a way around this. So because he's got an account that we can record, so he's letting us use his stuff, which is great. So here we are. We get to do it.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're gonna be up, I guess. I think we're gonna probably release this on the Randos United channel, and then like a lot of the discussions I've had, I link them in. So I don't put really anything on my channel other than, yeah, whatever, doesn't matter. So okay, so just so you know, I'm really terrible at interviewing people. So but how about you just I do have some questions here for a project that I'm looking at doing in the future, and maybe later on we can go through and do some of these questions, like hypothetical run at it. But yeah, if you want, I'd just love to hear your story. I mean, I'd like to hear about Mark in your life and who you are in that.
Sure. So I'm Mark Lefebvre. I have a YouTube channel called Navigating Patterns. Everyone's upset because it's hard to find. It's called Navigating Patterns. Just type that in. It should come right up. And on that channel, my project there is to help kind of fix some of the cultural cognitive grammar and give people models and ways to understand the world. And sort of, my journey to that was through Jordan Peterson, right? And a lot of that story is in my first conversation with Paul Vanderklay. And not to go over all of that material, but roughly I got into Peterson. I saw some stuff that I really resonated with, and then I found out, all these people are stuck. They have a meaning crisis, and why? This is weird. I had one. I got out of it, right? And then Vervaeke came along, and I kind of latched onto him, and things rolled from there onto the Discord server from Vervaeke's live meditation series, and then I've got our little community around Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. And I've been working with Manuel Post and Andre and Michelle and so many other people, Sally Joe, right, on a bunch of work around figuring out what's wrong and how we can help people. And what we do is help people when they're there. And that's sort of the project that we're on with we've got the meaningcommunity.com website, or meaningcommunity.com, same place. And we're trying to get tools and resources to people who want to help to build things that help other people, right? Build communities, et cetera. And, in terms of sort of how I got here, right? Like, if you want to go all the way back, I grew up in New England. New England's full of Puritans, Irish Catholic, right? Greek Orthodox, Polish. Like, we have all the different representations from multiple waves of immigration. And I grew up in Lowell, which is the big mill city, right? It's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And I'm a big history buff. So, like, if you want to know anything about that, I probably know something about it, unfortunately. Spent way too much time studying local history in Lowell. And then, so my father's side, that's all French Canadians. They're just all frogs from Montreal, roughly speaking. And they came by way of Maine, right? Biddeford, Maine. had the second highest French Canadian population, I think, outside of Canada, right? And then they moved to Lowell. So, some of my relatives were born in Maine, and the rest were born in Lowell. And on my mother's side, it's Greek and Irish, actually. So, that's the sort of makeup. And then growing up in New England, outside of Boston, but in somewhat a very important city. Lowell's a very important city in history because of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of immigrants, very mixed. In fact, for a while, and I don't know what the status is nowadays, but up and down, there were less than 50% white people in the city of Lowell. So I grew up in the most diverse city in the United States, roughly speaking. And so like racism and all that stuff is like just stuff I don't understand, because we just grew up with people from all over the world all the time. Right. So I just didn't even know these things were issues. And I've since moved down south to South Carolina. So I moved from Massachusetts down to South Carolina, and things are very different. The makeup's very different. The split's very different. The way things are laid out are very different. And, when I was in Lowell, my parents got divorced, right? And so I became a latchkey kid. I stayed with my father, not my mother. And
how old were you roughly around that time?
The divorce, I think I was 7 years old when they got divorced, and I'm an only child. So
what was it like up to that point for you in just the family setting?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were moving around because when I was real young, before I can really remember, we moved out to Kansas for a few years so my father could finish his dissertation and do his PhD at Kansas State University. And then while I was there, I was attending a Montessori school, interestingly enough, that was available on campus. But my parents didn't have much. Like my father was putting himself through school, right? So there were a couple tornadoes, and there's some excitement over there. And we lived in an apartment complex, and then we moved back, and we kind of moved around because we lived in one part of Lowell, and we moved to another part of Lowell, and we moved to another part of Lowell. It's one of those things. And when I was young, when we first moved back, actually, I lived a couple blocks away from my cousins. My mother's brother was down the street, basically. So, it was a kind of to me, it was normal, right? Because that's what I grew up with. But it was very average sort of public schools and whatnot until I got older and got into, my father wanted me to do well. So he got me into a private school, basically a private Catholic school. So that's where I did junior high and my first year of high school. And I switched Catholic schools in the middle of that too. So, and then I went back to public school, to Lowell High, which is big schools at over 1,000 students, and 2 buildings, and it's a crazy place right in downtown. So, but I didn't spend sort of my formative high school years there. That was later.
What kind of excuse me, what kind of interests did you have when you were say just up to the time of the divorce, and then how did that affect you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the divorce is this great betrayal, right? Because you have a family, you have stability, you have a functioning structure to be within and to relate to and to orient within. And then that breaks up, right? And so it's very traumatic, and it's one of those, seminal moments, right? When something like that happens. And, at that age, you respond with different things like, please God, I'll do anything, just don't let them get divorced, sort of talk right in your head, and trying to figure out why this is happening, because you don't know why your world's being destabilized necessarily. Looking back, and of course I don't know how accurate looking back actually is, but I seem to recall that I knew something was up, right? Because there was yelling or whatever. And so I wasn't, or I shouldn't have been totally surprised in some sense, although when you're a kid, you probably should be totally surprised, because what the hell do you know? Right? We often sort of, well, my 7-year-old self should have seen this coming and been able to adjust. It's no, because you can't, because you're too young, right?
Well, how sometimes strange things can just be normal, to a degree.
Right. Yeah, a lot of stuff gets normalized, right? And then I grew up not really sort of understanding it. So my father was very scientific and distanced, and very high standards too. So, and that, unfortunately, I've inherited that. So like, just, I don't hold anybody to my standards because I know that ain't going to happen. Like, they're not going to live up to that. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, I didn't grow up in an environment where if you hit the target, you got a cookie. Like, no, if you hit the target, that's great, right? But if you didn't get an A+, were you really trying? It's like,
Sure.
that was just how I grew up. And then, but my mother, on the other hand, she was completely crazy. And I didn't know this, at all. I didn't know this till much later, right? Much later in life. And I didn't know the extent of it until just before she passed away recently, right? Then as she's dying, I can see she can't construct the narratives to make her world make sense anymore. And I'm like, this is what you see in the world? Because, on the other hand, she could make amazing predictions that came true. But some of her stuff was just like, she just saw stuff that no one else could see and didn't have an impact on the world, right? So, but her predictions of crazy things were spot on in some cases. So it was really, it was really weird. So, I have these two sort of awkward parents, and I end up with my father, not my mother. And they tried to get back together a couple of times, and, but my father ended up buying a house. So I had a nice house, and the house was a house. It wasn't an apartment. So we had some stability for a long time there. And, I was in the neighborhood and meeting kids and, interacting, maybe not normally, but there was that. My mother was there living with us for a while, and then she left. And so there's always this turmoil and this tension, because they kept trying to get back together, and that didn't work out.
Sure. So so it sounds like, they're like, I think that my mom and dad tried to do that a couple times too. It just didn't really work out. I don't think they had the tools to really do it. But I think at the core of it, like, to this day, I would say that my dad definitely, what's going on? Oh, sorry about that. I might get another one of those, so don't mind me. But yeah, to this day, like, I would say that my dad probably still, he's married, but I would say that he still loves my mom. And I mean, maybe my mom, I don't know. Anyways, but so, okay. So what kind of, stuff did you do as a kid for fun? Like, what kind of things? Like, cause for me, it was, I remember, like, it's looking back to put myself in like my what it was like to be a kid, like, because a lot of it for me was, sorry if that is, there's a text that just showed up. Anyways, a lot of the stuff that happened when I was a kid, like, I wouldn't want to go back to be a kid again, because I just think that it was chaos. As far as, like, I had a really skewed perception of people. Like, I didn't really trust people, but I desperately wanted to, so that's the other weird thing. But so one thing that I like, when I think of, like, what it was like for me as a kid, as far as having an imagination, like, I remember when we were kids, we would go and we'd go dumpster diving, and we'd find, like, these blinds that were in the apartment dumpsters, and we'd take the string off them. And then I had, like, a Swiss Army knife, and went to the dollar store to get electric tape, and then we'd, like, carve out arrows. We make bows and arrows and forts and stuff. And, like, the imagination that happens when you're a kid, I think is pretty amazing. And, like, today, I don't, like, it's interesting because I can't get there as an adult necessarily. And I don't know where this is going. I'm just kind of following this idea. But, like, so what were you doing, like, when you were a kid? Like, what kind of stuff were you interested in? Like, what really grabbed your attention, I guess?
Yeah. So a bunch of things. I mean, so, I always had this science streak, right? So I got one A- in my science course ever in my life. Like, I was just right. And then I had Encyclopedia Britannica. I had this thing called How It Works. Like, we had, right. And there was, growing up around Boston, there's public broadcasting, right? And public broadcasting back when I was a kid was actually very good. And so if you watch some of the older stuff, and even the older stuff back before I watched it, is very good stuff. It's not all good now, but it was back then. And so I got a lot of education from watching high quality television because Boston happened to have it. And I got a lot from books and encyclopedias because, my father had a PhD. It was very important to him, right? That education and that whole focus. And I was very science oriented. I still am. It's just I happen to know what science is, and a lot of people don't. So I like to call them out for it because to some extent, like, I'm a scientific purist. Like, no, this is what science is. And if you think it's something else, you're wrong, right? Because that's how I grew up. But then the other side, I also grew up. So there were woods near where I was, right? And so I didn't have to go far. And, I had a bike and we'd ride our bikes, but we'd go into the woods, and there was an apartment complex down at the end of the street, which was literally, 100 feet from the house, right at the end of the road, right by, and there was a stream behind the apartment complex. And so when it would rain, they had these drainage things going into the stream, and I'd go over there and like build dams and build little ponds and retaining things. And, and you learn doing that, right? You're grabbing sand and rocks and doing things and creating big puddles in the parking lot, which some people weren't happy about, but generally I got left alone, so it didn't really matter. Right. And we had a little section of, undeveloped stuff at the end of the road too. And, there was a fort there, and we go romping through the woods and find stuff. We go dumpster diving, right? And then there were farms around where I was. And then when they finally got rid of the farm on the other side of the stream, they were building houses. And, I was older, but we went to the houses and grabbed stuff. Maybe we shouldn't have been, right? But yeah, exploring around construction sites and things like that was pretty normal. And there was a bus system too. So you could hop the bus, you could get into the city, right? You could do stuff. So I did a lot of different things, a lot of varied things. And I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading into the occult at a very young age even. And because my father's family is all a bunch of disaffected Catholics, right? So they have no interest in, they all went to church. They all know that whatever crazy liturgy they do. But, I only got dragged along when it was a big event, right? The Christmas, Easter, that's about it, right? So I didn't get any exposure really to any of that stuff. And I go to Catholic church today and I'm like, I have no idea what the hell these people are doing, right? It's like, well, I don't know what they're doing. But also growing up in Lowell, like in particular, like I think because the Puritans and Catholics live alongside one another to some extent, you don't ask about religion. It's not, you don't talk about it at all. It's impolite. Like you just wouldn't ask somebody about their religion. That wouldn't happen.
Sure.
Not that it wouldn't come up, right? But you wouldn't like seek to ask. You wouldn't say, what church do you go to? Or we didn't do things like that.
Right.
I knew what churches people went to because maybe they told me, it came up in conversation. But like down in the South, for example, they identify you about what church you go to. I haven't had that experience, thank goodness. But A, I'm me, and B, I'm pretty upfront. Like, I'm a Yankee, and I'm sorry, because I do apologize for that, because the South has been traumatized by the damn Yankees. Although technically I'm not a Yankee, I'm French, right? The French Canadians aren't actually Yankees, but whatever. From their mind, like, you came from up north, what are you doing down here? And they should be like that. Like, that's legitimate given the history between the North and the South, and the Puritans trying to infect everybody. And, the reason why there's Catholic schools in New England is because of the damn Puritans own the public school system, and none of the Catholics want their kids being taught by Puritans. Fair enough. There's a lot of indoctrination, and they tried to do the same thing in the South after the Civil War during Reconstruction. And, you kind of disarm people with that, right? And then they don't have to like immediately hate you, because my accent is not a Southern accent, obviously. Now I can kind of drop into one, but that probably Texan more than South Carolinian. So, I can do accents, but it's hard. And, I just want to be me. Like, I don't want to have to talk funny all the time for entertainment purposes. It is good for entertainment purposes.
Sure. So then, like, because I wasn't really raised in the church either. I mean, well, until I get like a little here and there as I got more into like, 13, 14, 15, a little bit of that started coming in, but it wasn't really, it wasn't really grabbing me or whatever. I was more interested in doing like rock and roll and shit like that, so that was more interesting to me. So, okay. So would you say that, so you ended up, you ended up going to school in that then afterwards, like in college or something like that?
No, I didn't go to college.
No? Okay.
No, I was totally not going to go to college at any point. My father wanted me to go to college, but A, he didn't set aside any money to do so. And B, he didn't understand how much college cost. And C, he didn't understand how it worked. And he had gotten remarried. So by that point, basically I wasn't interesting anymore or something. Right. And then there was a big debate for years, although it's been settled. She doesn't like me, which is fine. I don't particularly like her. And that creates friction between my father and I. So I don't talk to him anymore because she's not a good person. She's an evil person. And I mean that literally, and I can prove it, but I don't see the need to. And she's possessed by things like Munchausen by proxy and other things, which she's admitted to publicly, which blew my mind when it happened. Blew everybody's mind. The whole family's sitting there, right? And she says it. It's like, boom. And my grandmother and I are just like, yeah, we knew. Because we knew all along, because my grandmother's very smart. And so she saw what I saw. And yeah, this person's not all there. And like, fair enough. But, forcing people to pick sides. And I'm like, look, you can pick whatever side you want. I don't care. Right. But nowadays, my father just traumatizes me constantly by saying ridiculously evil and mean things, in front of me, which are just not appropriate. Like, oh, I have to take care of my family. Oh, really? Were you taking care of me when you threw me out and I had no place to live? Where did this new ethic of taking care of your family come from? Because this is new, right? And I just don't need that in my life. Like, I don't need to hear that. I don't need to hear things like that all the time, right? And so it's what do you do with toxic people? You just cut them out of your life. And like, fair enough. Like, it's great. He's not trying to talk to me, so that's perfect. Like, I don't have to do any work. And there's elements of my family who are like, oh, I hope you two make up. And I'm like, I don't want people being mean to me, like in my life. Like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't have that connectedness because of the trauma of effectively, being left homeless by both my parents independently. I don't need them. I survived without them. And, I mean, you can make some arguments about why that's bad for me or whatever, but it is what it is. And I'm not going to get all upset about having survived. Like, that seems silly. So I just don't like, it's no big deal. It's no skin off my nose. Like, it's fine. It's fine by me. Right. It's right. Interesting. My grandmother asked me at one point, she said, do people ever ask you, what it's like to be an only child? And I'm like, yeah. And she says, isn't that dumb? How would you know? And I'm like, exactly. I don't know why people ask questions like that. It's silly.
Yeah. Okay. So your parents divorced at around 7. You were very much in science. Like, so when did all this happen that you're talking about, where you had to kind of get thrown out in that?
Yeah, well, a lot of things happened. So my father moved away for my last year of high school. He was like, nope, we're leaving. I got my new wife. We're leaving. I was like, oh, okay. So, but I'm going to put you up at your uncle's house. So I get to stay at my house my grandparents first bought when they moved to Lowell, right? So, and we had lived in that neighborhood before. So it's great. It's a very second nicest neighborhood in Lowell, actually. It's a very nice neighborhood.
And stuff there in the neighborhood and stuff already? Did you already have some friends and stuff in the area?
Not in that, no, because this is my last year of high school. So he takes off. I go live with my uncle, and then I got sick and around the holidays. So I was at my mother's house. So then my uncle was like, well, I don't want you here if you're not going to be here. And I was like, what do you care? It's all paid. Like, what do you care? Right. And then my mother threw me out. And then I was like, And my father had bought a house, and he's like, oh, I'm going to build this entrance for you, and you're going to have a place to stay, and blah, blah. And none of that ever happened, right? It was just a fantasy on his part, because she wouldn't let it happen, which is fine. Like, again, I'm not mad. It just is what it is. And I got accused of breaking into the house and just crazy stuff that never happened, and like there were accusations, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know what was going on. There were accusations that I was going to sue my father to not be my parent anymore, and just crazy stuff and I knew none of this. So I found this out years later in some cases. Like, what? That's why I wasn't invited to family Christmas, because some interloper made up a story and you believed it? Like, okay, so it was weird. And that actually only happened once. Like, I got invited to all the other Christmases, but I was always, so my father's name is Mark. My name is Mark. My grandfather's name was Mark, right? So they always went through my father to get to me. Nobody in my family, not nobody, but most of the people in my family didn't talk to me directly. Like, I was not my own entity in their eyes. And again, like, this is how I grew up. So to me, it's like, whatever, I don't care. Like, I'm fine. Right. But it, it's easily conceived of as abusive behavior.
Well, yeah.
And, it had an impact, clearly. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in the woods alone. Like, like, I'm okay with it, but other people flip out. They're like, why are you alone? And so I had somebody ask me recently, he was like, how come you're not with somebody? And I'm like, you do know it takes two people, right? Like, you don't club women over the head and drag them back to your house. You right? Like, they have to want to be there.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And to me, it's just not I'm not a person who, because a lot of people are driven into relationships because they feel lonely. And it's like, I don't know what not lonely is, because I grew up alone. Like, I grew up literally alone. I was a latchkey kid. My father worked 1 million hours a week, right? Like I just don't know any other way to live in some sense. I probably couldn't live with somebody because I don't know how, right? So, it puts me in a weird spot, because people are always like, how are you surviving alone? And I'm like, how are you living with other people? That sounds terrible.
Sure. No, I get that. Yeah. Like, what I think, like, from what you're saying, like, that being a non-entity thing that you're talking about, and how, like, it doesn't really bother you. I don't know how people, like, aren't bothered by stuff. I have this terrible problem with taking everything so damn personally. Like, I feel things and I make them very personal, and I, like, so I'm kind of very immature in that way. It's not something I've been able to really think my way out of. You know what I mean? Like, I can take some actions and kind of grow and stretch a little more to become different, but it's still there. So it's difficult for me to just be different than to act as if. You know what I mean? I'm like one of these people where, like, you can't see my face in this clearly because I got this mask on, but I don't hide well. Like, you wouldn't want to. I'm terrible at poker, right? Because what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking is on my face, and I don't know how to not be that way. So it's people that, like yourself, who says, "Oh, whatever," like I'm kind of envious of, because I think that'd be great to be able to do that, but I just am not like that. I think that I think a good quality that I might have is where I'm able to at least today, I'm able to be more say what's on my mind, but but still I don't have a lot of exercise with it, so I don't do it well. So, like, I know I in the previous conversation that we had with Paul, like, I was feeling bad because I felt like I put you on the spot with some issues and stuff, and I wanted to apologize to you, because, like, I don't want to really handle myself that way. And also, it's hypocritical to a degree, and I haven't explained my position on that whole thing very well. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about it, but that's what I do, right? Like, I spend the next 4 days thinking about what the hell we just talked about, and then so yeah, no, I think I just want to put that out there. But I was just trying to relate with you here, because, like, I can see in the conversations and stuff that you have, you don't really let things kind of, like, attach themselves to you very well. So that's I'm a little envious.
I don't take things personally in many cases. even when I should. In some case, right? Some cases I should take them more personally, and I don't. And yeah, I don't think there's a need to apologize, Chad. I mean, you're confused and you take things very personally, and you try to get yourself in the middle of the story as part of your empathetic attitude, and I think that's fine. And you're struggling with it, and that, I think that's normal. Like, I think that's fine too. I see that a lot. A lot of people do that. You're not the first, second, or third person I know of that does that. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, but to some extent, I trained myself to be, we'll call it classic Epicurean, not the actual Greek idea, not the modern idea of Epicureanism, and a classic Stoic, right? So Stoicism it's a training, and it's interesting. So you mentioned you can't think your way out of it, right? You can't think your way into Stoicism. You can't think your way into detachment. Detachment's very difficult because we don't want to be detached. Because to some extent we can't, like, you can't detach fully. It's a big misunderstanding of Western Buddhists, of the Eastern Buddhist system, of actually how it works. It doesn't, the detachment is of a specific type in a specific way. So it's hard for us to know there's different types of detachment, there's different ways to detach, and that has different utility. And it's something you have to train yourself to do. And it's one of the nice things about John's got the meditation course that he did online with us live on YouTube. And then he followed up with the Cultivating Wisdom course, which is an excellent course. That talks more about Stoicism and classic Epicureanism, right? And then Neoplatonism, which I'm not a big fan of, but those are skills, right? Those are practices.
What is Epicureanism? What is that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah, Epicureanism is sometimes confused with this sort of gluttonous love of usually food, right? Usually food, but the Epicurean ethic, right? That the way the Epicureans actually did it was they said, no. You're supposed to have plain rice and enjoy it because it's plain rice, right? Which is it's not to take away from enjoying the big feast with the fancy foods and whatever, but it's to say that every meal should be savored and enjoyed equally. And not just every meal. Like, they have a whole system for figuring out, like, what do you actually need? Like, what are needs versus things you want versus, right? They have a whole categorization system, and there are practices in there. There's a book called The Wisdom of Hypatia that John recommends as part of his Cultivating Wisdom course on YouTube that you can just watch on his channel for free, John Vervaeke's YouTube channel. And, that goes through the practices that you need to embody to start that process. And then that's the first stage. The second stage is Stoicism. And there's a whole bunch of practices you can do to become more Stoic. And that's more disengaging of, it's acceptance of the things you can't change, right? So things are going to happen, and disengaging from some of the, not all, because you can't disengage completely, from some of the emotions that come up in you and in other people, right? And so again, you're detaching yourself from being in the middle of the story. And there's all these practices that you can do to help that sequence. You can't think your way out of it, that's for sure. And a lot of people, right, the modern message is you can intellectualize your way into and out of things, and that's absurd, and it doesn't work. And I don't recommend, it's not everything, but for most things, it absolutely isn't a thing that you can do.
Yeah, for me, and what helped me with that stuff in my life is honestly just some step work, and that's very much a practice, pragmatic practice, and an embodiment of new attitudes and stuff. So, like, yeah, no, I mean, and I've changed. Like, sometimes I look at my first fourth step I did, like, 7 years ago, and I can read that thing and I'm like, who the hell wrote this? Like, it is a totally different person. And so that's pretty cool. But like, I've had to continue to, and what's cool is it's like, so there's a target I'd like to be, the guy I'd like to be, right? And I'm moving towards that. But like, it's constant growth. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, no, I've read some of the Stoic, I think some of the Mark Aurelius or whatever. I've read some of his meditations and stuff. it's pretty good stuff. Like, but no, that's cool. Okay, so I want to get kind of back on track. Sorry. Okay, so what happens now after you kind of go off on your own? Then after you get sick there and you go and find a place, and you're kind of off on your own there, 18 years, 19, 20, and so on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was homeless. So for a while I was living in my car, right? I was hanging out at friends' houses. But I mean, I was living in my car, just my car in the winter in New England, which is not a recommended way to experience life. And I was hanging out in Harvard Square with some of the not so homeless people, right? The LARPers, the homeless LARPers, they're all from wealthy families, not upper class families, wealthy families, pretending like they're homeless when in fact they're not. Not everybody, but like 90% of them. And there was a whole drug and whatever scene over there. And I don't drink or take drugs or any of that. Never did. Never have. Never gonna. And I studied those people, and I found out, what the difference was between me and them. For example, like they actually had places to go. They were just rebelling against their parents, whereas I was not rebelling against my parents. My parents were rebelling against me. It's a totally different thing. And trying to manage survival. And then I got in with some very accepting hippies, because it's kind of redundant. Hippies are very accepting. And I rubbed up against them because I'm disagreeable, and you need rules, otherwise things break down. And they would try to force issues, right? They'd be like, oh, well, everybody's just going to get along magically, and I'm like, that's not going to work. And then when things would happen, like we almost got thrown out because they couldn't follow rules, I said, here are the rules and we're going to follow them. And if you don't like it, I will enforce them physically. And they got really upset, but, kept our place. So that was important because the landlord was going to throw us out. Like because they were doing stuff that was bothering the neighbors. That wasn't going to work. And we had a cheap, beautiful apartment, not too far from the buses. You could walk to Harvard Square. You could walk to other places. It was a great place to live. But eventually I left that area, and when I got my own big apartment and could pick my own roommates, which was way better. So yeah, I mean, it was a struggle, right? I mean, I was on a tight budget, and I was living with these poor hippies, all of whom, again, they came from wealthy families. They had more than enough money. They just like to pretend that, oh, woe is me. Whereas I had no safety net. Like they all had safety nets. I had no safety net. And so we weren't, living in the same environment in some sense. So that was sort of, getting through that, right? And I sort of, everything sort of from the tail end of my homelessness, we'll say when I moved to Brookline, Massachusetts, and lived there for about 4 years, everything sort of before that, I call the before time. And then everything else is the after time, because things are just so different from, tumultuous divorce and, traumatic events, living a latchkey kid life, right? And scuffles as a kid, like you're a kid, and you get into fights in school and the whole 9 yards, right? And then this homelessness and then everything else.
Yeah. So what kind of when you talk about those traumatic events as the latchkey kid, like, so what was some of that like? Like what was going on there? Could you get into some detail there?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there were bullies in the neighborhood, right? Like there always are. And there were fights. And there were times when kids would get a little over rambunctious and like attack the house, literally, because I was the only one home and father wasn't going to be home for hours, So,
Sure.
And sometimes things get quite contentious. And there were all kinds of little incidents and people playing pranks and the normal stuff that kids do. It was all normal stuff to some extent. It's just I had no safety net for any of that stuff. There was no one there, right? My mother's gone, my father's not home, right? I'm managing the house myself, and so I have to come up with my own rules. I have to come up with my own systems. Otherwise, things don't work, right? And
Right.
And I knew that early on, and I was well equipped. I mean, I went to an exclusive private school for a while, in junior high and the first year of high school. You need to wear a suit, coat, and tie into school. And I was fine with that, worked fine for me. I'm like, whatever, man. get to wear a suit and tie every day. Fine. It was a bit of a pain in the ass. Shoes suck, right? Dress shoes are terrible, but it worked out. And we'd play in the woods in our suits and ties and stuff. So yeah, whatever, it wasn't a big deal. And a lot of, computer stuff. So my father always got me into the technology stuff, special schools, whatever, after school programs, summer programs, right? So, I do computers for a living. I know a lot about computers. So yeah.
Sure. So how old are you roughly? Are we about the same? I'm 38. Are we about the same age or?
No, we're not all that close in age.
Okay. Yeah, because as far as the computer stuff, I went to a little school, and the only thing I remember about computers, they had typing classes and stuff. I was a terrible student, by the way. I just couldn't do it, man. I really couldn't apply myself. And I noticed this when I'm doing a tile apprenticeship class for the last couple of years, and I do really well in the field. I go, and I know the stuff, and I learn really well that way. But you put me in a classroom, and I just kind of start to fall asleep, and I can't even help it. I have trouble even comprehension, listening to, even if he's doing a video and he's talking and stuff. I just can't. I don't know what that is, man. But I think about that, and I was exactly like that, and I thought it was looking for my whole life growing up. I thought I was just a bad student, and I don't know if that's true anymore, because I think I've done a lot of autodidact readings and stuff like this, and I really latch on to stuff that I'm interested in, and I can excel at those things. But you put me in a classroom, and it just kills me, man. And I just think that there's a missed thing and I wonder how many guys are out there like myself who just couldn't do it,
Well, there's different kinds of learning, and that's part of the problem, is that we have an education system, and it is designed for one type of learning, and that's it, right? There's one type of teaching, roughly speaking, and it's not very embodied. And for people who learn embodied, that's a whole different thing. And then I'm in a completely different category. So if I'm doing my studying because I learn very fast, not a problem. So I test well. I test really well. Actually, the only way I got into private school was because I tested well, because they were like, you don't do homework. And I'm like, yeah, why would I do that? Waste of time. My whole life, from grade 1 on, I'm not doing this homework. Were you nuts? I could, but why? I can't do well in classes. Actually, I can look like I'm doing well. I can answer questions, all that stuff. So I remember in private school, right? So we're dealing with college level textbooks in some cases. So I'm in private school, and my buddy and I sat next to each other, and we just had a grand old time. He had to be moved because we talked all day. And the teacher was like, why are you getting an A? You're talking to him all day, and he's getting a C. And I'm like, I don't know. Is he not listening? Because I can listen to 2 conversations at once, it turns out. I didn't know everybody couldn't do that. Apparently the rest of you can't. I'm sorry. But I can listen to 2 conversations, no problem. Especially when I was young, I could do it really easily. So, but also I had read the book, the whole book. We only did half the book in that class. I read the whole book before I got to the first class, because they had us pick up the books 2 weeks early. So I picked up the books. I read all my damn school books because they were interesting. I'm like, oh, look at this. I just buzzed through them all. And I'm a slow reader, but I buzzed through them all, and I had all the knowledge. So when the tests came, I just no problem, and turn in the test really early, and you get an A. And they were always like, you could get every question right if you wanted to. You need to take more time. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but whatever. I'm not going for perfection. I was happy to. And I was in a perfectionist family too, but I was like, look, A is fine. I don't need the A+. I'm good. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I got an A+, like science, I got to get an A+. Very crushed by my A-, because of a stupid snake question too. I'm like, really? A snake question? Really? We're going to talk about snakes. I didn't get the hinged jaw question. Oh, really? I left out the hinged jaw. And you're going to A- me for that. I'm still angry about that, by the way, obviously. So, but I can switch between them, right? But I learn when I engage voluntarily.
Right.
Other people learn when they're engaged with. I learn when I engage. And classroom doesn't do it for me either. I learn outside the classroom, and then I get into the classroom and I excel. But that's very different.
Right. Yeah, no, it's astonishing to me how like I could listen to these lectures like when I tripped over Peterson, that was totally a weird revelation, because it was like I was blown away that I'm listening. I'm like, what am I? And now I'm actually going through like all these lectures and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I can understand it. Like now, I think if I were to actually like do homework on it, it would be bad. I just wouldn't be able. Like that's the difference, I think, between being actually in the classroom and having an assignment. Like, because I don't get to embody what I'm being taught or whatever. But it's fascinating and interesting to me. That just blew my mind. I mean, we're listening to lectures that are like, as long as like, I don't know, like Forrest Gump. You know what I mean? That's crazy to me. We're like these, and it's entertaining. It's like gripping. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
people don't understand the importance of articulation, and they think a lecture is a lecture. A lecture is not a lecture. I've been around colleges. I've seen lots of lectures. I've experienced them online and for years and years, my whole life, right? Like I was in Boston. You could just go into the school and audit a class. You didn't have to be a student. No one knew, right? So I've done that, So I have seen classes from Harvard and classes from MIT and classes from Northeastern and Boston University. And I've seen these. And a full class was not for me because short attention span. But I've seen this stuff. I've seen how it works. And it's sort of like on the app Clubhouse there. People are like, oh, we need a more smart people. And I'm like, you know what? The problem is that's an incorrect statement. Nobody wants to hear an expert on stage unless they're articulate. They have to be articulate. If they can't communicate, I don't want to listen to them try to communicate. I don't care how expert they are, right? And it's like, well, by expert, we need somebody who can articulate. Yeah, but that's not most people. Like most people can't articulate things well. And so articulation is your ability to spill it back out after you have it in, right? Whatever's inside you for it to come out, for you to communicate it to others. But most knowledge, as Peterson talks about, is embodied. And it doesn't need to go any further. Like if you know how to farm, you don't need to tell other people how to farm. You can just do it. Right. So that's what people don't understand. And then there's different categories and classifications of lectures. Some lecturers, in fact, the vast majority of lecturers are not interesting, or are talking about uninteresting things, or are talking about interesting things in an uninteresting way, because there's a lot there. And if you've never given a presentation, and I have in Fortune 500 settings, it ain't easy. There's a bunch of skills you need to give presentations, good presentations. There's a bunch of skills. It's not just public speaking at that point, although that's a separate set of skills. You need all the public speaking skills, plus all the information organizational skills, plus all the skills about how to make this interesting, plus all of how to tie it together. Because if you just sit there and give a lecture, it won't tie together. And one of the brilliant things that Peterson does, in my opinion, is he weaves a thread very carefully that I can actually follow, which is fascinating. I'm like, oh, I thought I was the only one that could do stuff like this. This is very clever, right? I can see what he's doing, right? Where he's tying stories together in a very unique way, and he's putting the personal in between the informational, right? So it's pure information. Oh, here's this diagram. Here's how I think we operate. But by the way, here's an example from my clinical, right? And then he goes back and ties the other end of that personal story into the next piece of information. And that's a skill, or it can be. Some people do it naturally, because some people have natural skills, but it's a skill you can learn. Maybe you can't do it as well as he can, but you can learn to get better at it.
Sure. I mean, there's I get this a lot, because I would go to a lot of AA meetings and listen to a lot of different speakers tell their stories. And there's some guys that just suck real bad. I mean, they're not getting paid to do it anyway, so good. Who cares? They're just trying to share their experience and stuff. But there's some guys and gals out there that could just grab you, and like they do all the technical information, they could do all the story. They're right in there in the story with them, because you know that they've been there, and that's such a great skill. And there's something very convincing about it too, because when my story starts to meet your story, that's where the changes really, oh, like, so this is what they mean by this in the book, and then they're able to kind of take like these the language and move it around, and use it a little, make it more accessible to everyday Joes. I think a lot of guys in AA that are like super smart, they have a lot of difficulty in AA, because they say you can think your way right out of this program because you think you're going to figure this out. Good luck, guys. Like, this is way simpler than, and sometimes I'm quite envious of the guys that are like really just like and they're just going along. They're not really, they don't seem to have any trouble with it. They're not overthinking it. They're just like right in them. Like, that's nice, man. But
yeah, we tend to overthink things, and we've placed a lot of emphasis on education and thinking, and but articulation is not an indication of how smart you are. Like, charlatans are articulate, but they know they don't know what they're talking about, but they know how to manipulate you. And yeah, AA is interesting, right? Because it's a bunch of compressed wisdom, right? And if you think you're smarter than that compressed wisdom, you're probably wrong, because it's wisdom that's been gathered up really over the ages, right? They steal a lot of stuff from the Christian tradition, for example, right? So
it's compressed wisdom, but a big equal amount is personal experience. So when these things meet,
right. Wisdom's no good unless it relates to you. Right. That's true of any information, right? Any information is no good unless it relates to you. And we live in a world where we've been told that's not true, right? That there's an objective space, and that the things in the objective space have inherent value independent of you. And then you're an individual, so you have full freedom. But that's not the way the world is at all. And so that doesn't work. Like, that model of trying to exist doesn't work long term. It may work for a while, but it doesn't work long term. And then the implication is we try to over understand things, right? We're trying to grasp things in our head bigger than us, because we have the hubris to believe that that's possible. And with wisdom, you can embody wisdom for a little while, and that's about it. But wisdom really is this compressed knowledge that you can grab onto and relate to. If you're open, you have to be open to it, though, right? You have to be open to the wisdom that helps you to live once you relate to it. But you have to relate to it, and it has to be able to relate to you. But that half that effort's in you, and that requires submission, which is the big problem we have in the individualistic age where we want to be individuals. There's very little submission, but submission's inevitable. And so if you don't know what you're submitting to, you're probably ideologically possessed.
Sure. Yeah. And there's so one thing that I feel quite grateful, actually. I used to feel kind of bad about not having gone to college or or anything like that. And my grandfather and my father they were really like adamant that Chad goes to college, and I was just not, I wasn't really interested in it. And they would say things like, well, the thing about going to college is like you're going to prove to somebody that you're willing to go through something to get somewhere, which is true. But then the other thing they said is, when you do this, you're kind of a part of a secret club when you go to college. And I'm like, that sounds like bullshit to me. Like, I mean, it just didn't sound very appealing. In many ways, I feel like I dodged a bullet and kind of being the screw up that I was, because like I had no formal training. I worked in shipping. I worked on construction sites my whole life. I just didn't do anything. So I feel pretty grateful about that. So yeah. So you didn't, why you didn't go to college? Because you said you didn't have the support to go there, financial support and that?
No, I had no interest.
or what?
No, I had no interest. I
Okay.
saw through the college lie early on, and like I had a book about how the SATs were a bunch of BS, and like I had my eyes open. I knew what was going on in the world, and I knew that college was a bad idea for me. And look, I mean, if they wanted to give me a PhD in 2 years, I would have gone to college. That would have been fine. If you're telling me it takes longer than 2 years to learn something in a PhD program, maybe for you, not for me.
Right.
And maybe that's arrogant, and maybe I'm wrong. But look, that was the attitude at the time, and I have that attitude now. I learn very fast, and I didn't know this. I learn very fast. I learn unbelievably quickly, and so I just take in data, and it all makes sense to me, and I move right on with my day. And so I had no interest in taking 4 years to get some kind of wacky degree that to me didn't mean anything, and another 4 years or 8 years or 10 years or whatever it would have taken to get a PhD. Even though my father had one, I was like, I have no, and he had a PhD in English literature, but he worked in tech, right? And so it's like, well, what good is this, right? And I mean, to be fair, he was the head of documentation, so yeah, literary skills, documentation, good, right? Right, tech writing, all that good stuff. But really, like, where did that degree get you? Because normally you just go off and teach English to foreigners or something in a foreign country, right? Like, an English lit degree is really not the best degree in the world to have. So I wanted no part of that. And people have since said, oh, you should become a lawyer. And it's like, it would have taken too long to get to school. I get bored, man. I get bored fast. I got to learn stuff. You can't sit there and lecture me on stuff that, to me is obvious and easy to pick up. Like, it's no good. So I had no interest in that. Like I said, I'm going to school and I'm goofing off. And this is a private school. I'm going to school, goofing off. And the teachers are like, how the hell are you getting A's? And I'm like, I don't understand the question. How is everybody not getting A's? Like,
did you have a photographic memory or what?
So, no, we're going to bring that up. This is an argument between my brain and I all the time. I want my memory to be better, and my brain is like, we can't do it. Every once in a while, I can see pictures. The problem comes in the sabotage. So my brain actually sabotages. So there was a time in school where we had daily quizzes. So I'd do the quiz and I'd pass it up. And again, I was usually first. Pass up the stupid quiz. I'd go back to the desk. I'd shut my eyes a little and I'd correct the quiz in my head. And then I'd go, what the hell? Why didn't you get the right? If you had the right answers, brain, why didn't you give them to me? So this is a constant conversation I have with my brain my whole life. So there have been other instances when I've been able to look at things in my head and read them. But usually I can look at them and I can't read the specific word I need to read to understand the text. So sometimes, and this is rare, like I do not have an eidetic memory, right? But sometimes I do. Every once in a while, I'll have a flash. But I find it more useful to use memory palace style techniques. And that really helped my memory a lot and got me, far enough along that the eidetic memory thing is uninteresting to me, even though every once in a while it creeps up and says and teases me and then takes a word or a phrase or some sentences and blurs them out when I can read everything around it. That kind of pisses me off. But I'm good with authors sometimes, because if I've seen the book and I have the colors, sometimes the author will come to me, although I can't usually read the damn name again. But yeah, but that's very unusual. Most of the time, I don't have anything like an eidetic memory, but every once in a while I do. And I have a friend of mine who remembers numbers, which I can't do because I'm dyslexic. But B, we're driving. He runs a towing company. Driving down the street one day, and he goes, that plate from that car used to be on a blue Toyota. And I was just like, how in the name of God, in the middle of the streets of Boston, very crowded, how do you know this? And he's like, because we towed it 2 years ago. What?
Yeah.
You towed that car, and I'm not even sure he towed it. He might just remember from calling the car in, because that's his memory. It's nuts. And I don't have a memory anywhere near that good, nowhere near that good. So
it's weird. I relate to that though to a degree, because there's some stuff like I can remember stuff. And I know we said earlier, like sometimes memory it can't really be trusted. But man, I tell you, I can remember stuff. I can remember stuff from like 2, 3, 4 years old, like vividly. And then I start to lose stuff once I get to probably, 10, 11, 12. And then like, yeah, once I get to 18 and 19, there's like a couple things here and there, little flashes. But I remember before when we had landlines, like I could remember somebody could tell me a phone number and it'd be locked in. And now I couldn't do it. I had to really work to remember my wife's phone number because like I don't have to. Like that's I think sometimes this technology we have, it's wonderful, but man, it really kind of it kind of hinders us a bit, I think, to some degree, because it's doing all sorts of cognitive thinking for us if we let it, where we don't have to be responsible for the things I know or the beliefs I have or the thing, all this different stuff. It's really strange. And I just wonder what it's going to look like as we get down the road. Yeah. So where did you do? What kind of line of work did you get into, and how? Like, and what drove you there?
yeah, I mean, I was always in computers. That's my whole life, pretty much, has been in computers. I worked at UPS when I was very young, still in high school, and I did very well there because I could just crank out the packages. But everything else was computer work. So graphic design, programming, technical support, documentation, right? I was a tech writer for a while. I ostensibly actually ran a small company for somebody, right? He owned it, but I was doing I was wearing all the hats. I did software engineering. I hung out at the GNU Labs with, Richard Stallman and those people. So yeah, I was very much into computers, and I'd code all the time, and I was an efficiency nut. So I had my own meditation program. And this is mostly when I was living with the hippies, right? My own meditation program. I have my sleep only 4 hours a night thing, which I have a paper on now. I had all of these ways to make everything super efficient. So, I mean, I was a hyper efficient person. And because I can do things like, listen, when I was young, I could listen to 3 conversations and participate in 2 of them live, like with other people in the room, sort of a thing. And that was amazing. And also like, I'm always wishy-washy on my hippie things because they did a lot of things that were very bad, but also they discussed philosophy all the time, right? That was their big thing, was trying to figure out the world. And, we're all young and trying to figure out the world, although they were older than I was on average. So very deep conversations about Plato and Socrates and, all these philosophers and philosophical theories and all that. So I was exposed to that indirectly through those conversations. And that was a regular thing. Like it was open parlor night, they called it, right? And people would just come over from all over, and they'd all get together, and there'd be snacks, and we'd talk about philosophy, for 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours, right? And the rest of the time for them it was drugs and whatever else. So
it kind of sounds like Estuary, but without the drugs. Or with drugs.
Well, it's similar in some ways, right? Except they were all rebels against religion. So they weren't really talking about religion. They were trying to, and this is the modern project, right? Trying to use philosophy in place of religion, which I think is a bad move and an invalid move. The ancient Greeks would have thought you were nuts if you tried that. That they didn't conceive of the world that way at all. And when we use philosophy, we don't use it the way they did. And I think most modern science fiction is the closest thing we have to ancient philosophy. I think that's fair.
So, okay, so as you go along in your life there, then you got all these different jobs. Did you ever end up getting married and having kids or anything like this?
No. I've been alone most of my life. My longest relationship was 3.5 years.
Okay.
And, that ended in, more lies and betrayal. Like most relationships ended in lies and betrayal. So, and I was trying to be very accommodating, and maybe that was a mistake. I don't know, right? But she was, in college and wanted to do things, a very bright girl, but she thought she was smarter than me, which didn't happen. Like, she thought she was pulling one over on me or whatever, and that never happened, right? She's always constantly trying to, better me or whatever. At one point she went to Northeastern, she's taking chemical engineering, not at Northeastern University, like not a small feat. And they had a project, an end of semester project or whatever. And there were like 6 of them working on this stupid thing. And she called me up. I was in the middle of doing work. Like, I was working all the time, tuning servers and doing crazy stuff. I had my own personal computer lab, right? I had 50 computers in my house. So I'm tuning computers and playing with stuff. And she calls me up out of blue and goes, we need your help. We need your help. We're trying to design a hydrogen car. And we need a way so that the hydrogen doesn't, so we can, like a regular gas tank, so you can put hydrogen in, and then when you pull the thing out, the hydrogen doesn't leak out. And I went, oh yeah, well, what I would do is, make it a graduated cylinder with a ball and have the thing push the ball up. And then when you pull it out, the ball will form a seal in the back end. And she's like, we've been working on this for 2.5 hours. And you just came up with that off the top of your head. I'm like, yeah, and I'm busy. Like, are we done? Because stuff to do. I mean, I wasn't really like that, but like in my brain, I'm going like, okay, and are we done with this conversation? I'm in the middle. You interrupted me in the middle of work. Yeah, I thought you were gone for 4 hours or, whatever. She'd been gone all day. But she was floored. And I was like, I don't even know why that's a question that would take time to think about. Like, this is all obvious stuff. So they used that method, and like they got a good passing grade, because that was the big problem to solve in the whole puzzle of hydrogen vehicles, which, were years away from even being a thing. And she wanted to go off and sleep with other people and all that. And I had been exposed to that. Like, I didn't know the hippies were, some of them were honest, like polyamory doesn't work. Like, don't try this. It won't work for most people. And I saw it fail like 1,000 times, but I was like, oh, whatever, if that's what you want to do, let me know when you're done, because I'm not participating. But she couldn't follow any rules, right? It was, well, and she set a lot of the rules, and then she couldn't follow her own rules. And I was like, well, then you're not reliable. You got to go. And she went. So I was like, bye, see ya. Didn't miss it. I was like, I can't be in this, crazy thing, right? Like, it was just too much chaos for me.
Yeah. So that was some time ago. Like, so are you, like, is that something that you'd like at some point to meet somebody, or I know you've been talking a little bit about the intimacy crisis, and I haven't really talked with you much on that. And why does that come to mind for you?
Yeah. So, well, we haven't talked to anybody about the intimacy crisis. It's more of a budding idea. So, and yeah, it does segue right into your question. So,
I don't really want to hear about the idea per se, as much as why is it coming to you, I guess. Why is it on your radar?
Yeah. Well, I think that the meaning crisis was on my radar, right? Because as I told Paul in our first talk together, Paul Vanderklay, you see what Peterson does, and then you find out that there's this meaning crisis. And then Vervaeke gives you a framework for understanding that. And I don't have a meaning crisis. Like, I fixed it years ago when I was homeless. Otherwise, I would be dead. And so, like, this is a problem I can help address, right? And I see what Peterson's doing, and I'm like, people should be doing what Peterson's doing, helping people any way they can. Like, it doesn't, you can't be Peterson, you're not him, but you can help people using your unique perspective and your unique skills, etc. And so you should do that, right? Like, that's a good thing to do. It's an ethical way to behave in the world, we'll say, or a moral way to behave in the world. And so I take the meaning crisis very seriously. But what I noticed in studying the meaning crisis was the meaning crisis comes from the intimacy crisis. And this is, to your point, very near and dear to my heart, because I think that's part of the problem. People don't know how to be intimate with one another. They don't know how to be in a relationship. They don't have the tools and skills to navigate conflict and comfort and connectedness as such, right? Because we've been focused on objects. Like, what is my relationship to this cup? Irrelevant. Why would you discuss that? You're a lunatic. Like, talk about an important connection, like your connection to another person, right? And so this is the problem of the modern age in some sense, is this lack of intimacy, this lack of ability to navigate deep human connections with other humans. And it's just manifest everywhere. And I think the side effect of that, what it leads to, is a meaning crisis, because meaning is all about finding intelligibility, which is, roughly speaking, where and how things are connected in the world. And so if you're not connecting to the world, to other people, to build something bigger than yourself, then you'll become nihilistic, because eventually you build all the things you can build as a single person, and you go, yeah, but when I'm dead, all of this is dead. Not just my knowledge that I can't pass on because there's no one to pass it on to, but the things that I build aren't going to outlast me, because people who didn't build them don't know how to take care of them. Right. And so the only way I can build something bigger than me that outlasts me and therefore gives my life a meaning past my death is by cooperating with other people, by participating with other people. Right. And so if I can't do that, then meaning crisis. Right. And so there's two aspects to the meaning crisis: personal meaning crisis. Why is what I'm doing worth anything? Right. And then, what can I do? You can get out of that to some extent. But then there's, well, what about when I die? Right? What impact can I have in the world beyond myself? Well, none, unless you have other people help you, because you're just an insufficient creature in the world, and you're submitted to time. Like, eventually you'll die. You're submitted to time.
Well, yeah, I saw when my grandmother died a couple of years ago. So it was, here's what I noticed about our family in general. There was like, we started out in California, so like everybody. So I had, 2 sets of step parents and 6 grandparents. It's just like all the family, just a bunch of them, and a lot of poor communications, I guess. And but eventually what ends up happening is my brother and my mother and I, we go to Wisconsin, and then her brother goes to Idaho, and then my grandfather and my grandmother are in California. They're stuck there by themselves. And then the other sides of the family, like my dad eventually goes to Texas, his mom goes up to Oregon. So all these people get all split apart, and they don't talk much. And I also think, like, there is no strong familial history in general through any of this, that goes back through generations in our family. My dad seems to think it has something to do with the first Civil War. I don't know how true that is, but I think there's something to that on the bigger scale. Our American family histories. Anyway, so what ends up happening is I went up to go visit my grandmother because she was dying and she was terrified. And she was terrified because, like, nobody was there. It was like her and her husband, and he was really sick. And my aunt would go visit her, but my father wasn't really talking with her. And we went up to go visit her, and she passed a couple days before we got there. And like, I just was thinking about how terrifying that would be to die like with no family. Like, when Peterson talks about how when people have kids and there's something that pays you back, that, I think that's what he's talking about. Like, you're going to be able to have family around by the time you're old and like decrepit, and hopefully you don't have to go to a nursing home because after that. But like, I was just thinking about that like all this meaning crisis, intimacy crisis, the spiritual malady, this the loss of spirituality in the home. I think in generations of this stuff over the decades has like done just a number on us. And now we have like this little God that I can hold in my pocket, and I can scroll up and down and scroll all the greatest libraries in the world. Like, this is now my family, but it's just a family of me. Like, I think like all this different kinds of stuff. And when I'm talking like this, I'm sure you think I'm like all over the place, because I am, but that's how my mind thinks. So I apologize if I'm all over the place, but it's just a mess, man. And there's no, when you talk about being what's the word, not subservient, but like what's the word that you use when you're talking about what are you submitted to? Yes. Like there's not a lot that we're submitted to, as you said. And I think like the basic God idea is something that's been, for whatever reason, eroded and taken away. And I think that's caused so many problems. It's like, and then I was listening to Vanderklay today. He was talking to this guy, and he talked about getting away from the local, and how like the factory system that and all this stuff's like screwed everything up. And yeah, I mean, all of that stuff, I know I'm all over the place, and the smart people who are listening to this channel probably think I'm a nut, but it's so nuts to me. That's what this looks like. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, how do we fix this? And so like, and then when we talked about the, like the calling evil out and doing it poorly, I agree, by the way. Like, I think that it's something that should be done. Like, and that's one thing I wasn't able to say to you before. Like, I agree that it should be done. It's just like, there's like, where do you start? And then there's a price to pay for when you do it. And it's like all this stuff mixing up makes somebody like me, who's a mess, even more messy, I guess.
No, so, I mean, I could follow what you said just fine, Chad. I think you're fine. I think you're there is a single thread there, right? The golden thread of wisdom, if we want to rip Peterson off in his Peterson Vervaeke talk. There is a way in which we're not grounded anymore. Historically, we don't have a family grounding. We don't have a heritage. People aren't, they don't understand where they came from and the things that made them, right? Because every survival in history and all the failures made you, right? Without all that, we don't have all this. And we need to have some grace and gratitude for that, right? We need to really embody some gratitude. But in order to have gratitude, you have to submit to the fact that, all this stuff was here for you to inherit, and it costs lives. And that's scary because it's a lot of responsibility, and you can't carry the responsibility yourself. So you need to give it up to someone bigger who can carry it, right? And that's the Christian story to some extent. And that's part of what we've lost. And yeah, I like what you said about this thing, right? Like, oh, it's in my pocket. It's in my pocket. Well, what is in my pocket? Well, what's in my pocket is the sum total of human knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's in my pocket. I have the sum total of human knowledge. Mine, right? It's like, no, you inherited the sum total of human knowledge. You don't have it. It can be taken away, right? And in fact, it is. Like, we're destroying history left and right and center. And I would argue that's always worse. Like, because if you don't have bad things from history to reference, you won't know what bad things are. And that was sort of the point. And and it's a fair critique. And I'm trying to address. It's not just your critique. I'm trying to address the critique around speaking out against evil. What do you mean? Because I don't mean get in a conversation. I don't mean have a discussion. I don't mean judge people, because you don't have to do those things to speak out. But I do mean that might mean you go to the lions. Like, you might get fed to a lion if you do it. I'm just okay getting fed to the lion. Like, this is a different problem. Maybe if you have a family and plans and whatever, you're not okay being fed to a lion. And I'm not judging. I'm just saying there is a difference there. Sure, absolutely. and I can't make that decision for you, and I can't judge you for it because I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I know what the right answer is for me, and I know what I think people should do as Christians, and that's call out evil. But it's not to be judgmental. It's to make people who don't have another way to understand what evil is actually know what evil is, because they don't know. Sure. They just don't know. And I'm appreciative that you agree. And I understand there's a difference between signaling something and conversing or debating or using that signal to impose. Signals don't have to impose. You can just scream at the top of your lungs. That's a signal. I don't think that's a particularly helpful signal, but I think we don't have enough helpful signals. And we respond better to negative than we do to positive. That's just evolutionarily seems to be the case. And so calling out negative things, saying, no, this is a bad thing, this is evil, right? Whether it's an action someone took or it's an event that took place, right? It's never a person, right? It might be a person who did the evil, fair enough. But it's not like we're calling out the embodiment of Satan, although I do sometimes, and maybe I shouldn't, but I do. And I'm not hiding the ball on what I do. I do things that are definitely on the other side of the line for many people, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with you telling me I think you went on the other side of the line with that, because I need that feedback, because maybe I did. And maybe I didn't. I don't know. But I don't know where the line is any better than anybody else does to some extent. Sure. I have my lines, though, and I'm going to stick to them. And that gives me a distinct advantage in a lot of situations that other people don't have.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, like what I think what Chris and you are kind of the guys we're addressing, because I agree. I mean, I think there's a reason why I probably have stayed away. There's probably two reasons why I stayed away from organized religion in general, because part of it was the hypocrisy of it, I thought. And then the other part of it is what I mean by hypocrisy is like or like
it's there.
Like really,
it's there.
Really, right. But also really crusty judgmental folks that I just think are full of shit. But then the other part of it is like this Disneyland, like McDonald's version of Christianity there's no teeth in it. Because I do agree. I mean, like to really, I think to live this life in the Christian context, it should have teeth. It should be dangerous to a degree. And that, I mean, like that's where I'm kind of weird, because I will say stuff that most Christians probably wouldn't agree with, right? Because I'm constant questioning. And so like if I was at a Bible study once, and I can't remember what the lady was saying, but I was just telling her, like, I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe what you're saying is true. Like, what you're saying is there's no depth or weight. I'm sorry, I just don't believe you. So like, I think where my caution is around my ability to go overboard. I think that's also where my worry is around that topic. And also I've also framed my worry as calling out evil. My concern with it is if it's too high in the hierarchy, that's the concern that I have with it, right? Because I think that everybody's going to do it. There's no way around it. Like, we're going to do it. But when it becomes like the highest thing, one of the highest things to do, that's not, I don't think that, and I get to do it no matter what, right? Because I got the free will, and I could do evil, I could do good, right? But I will pay a price for both of those. I think, even doing good, you can't pay a price for doing it. So it is what it is. And so I just want to clear up our disagreement here for anybody because there are people who are talking about it, and it's like, yeah, it's good that we are talking about it though too, So because it gets things on a level where it's not. This is what I noticed in AA. There's trouble in AA from time to time, and the reason is because people are unwilling to discuss these issues, certain issues, right? And some issues, they don't belong in AA. right? But we're not willing to talk about how these issues don't belong in AA. So, like, it's like,
Can't avoid
yeah,
it if you don't know
yeah,
what it is you're avoiding.
yeah. And there's no, if we're not taking part in an active inventory of where we are, it's not good. This is, I think, I think literally almost every problem on the planet can be whittled down to one simple thing: a lack of education and communication. Kind of the same thing there, like a lack of understanding. I guess it's all kind of, the golden thread is there in that too. Like, it's just silence, and so.
Yeah, and I think the missing piece there is courage, right? It takes courage. It has to take courage. If it doesn't take courage, if you're off doing this living hidden thing, it's like, I don't think living hidden means what you think it means. I think that's the problem. Like, living hidden means don't be out there screaming at people that I'm a Christian, yay, right? But it doesn't mean hide from people such that you're watching them do bad things and nothing's happening. It's a terrible story. Like, there's a terrible recent story that I heard from Jonathan Alb on BOM and Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord, and apparently a woman was raped in full view of a bunch of people on a train, like on a subway or something. And I'm like, how can I be living in that world? Like, and the problem is, like, people don't get it. Like, rape is terrible. It's horrible. It's like probably the second worst thing that can happen, right? Murder is probably the worst. And there's different degrees of murder, right? Whatever.
Worse than it is you not doing anything about it when it's going.
Right. Well, right. But see, and this is what I was getting at. Like, people don't get it. Like, if that happens in a dark alley and it's just two people are traumatized at most, right? And that's it. And then it ends there. If that happens in public and no one does anything, everybody there is traumatized, right? And the thing you can say, well, if I stood up, maybe I'd get hurt. Maybe. But chances are, if you stand up, somebody else will also stand up. That's the first problem. But let's assume that didn't happen. Are you telling me that it is better for you to let her get hurt than for you to get hurt? Because for me, it's a sacrifice question. Are you Christian enough to sacrifice? And I don't know what the sacrifice is. Maybe he'll kill you. Yeah, that could happen. Welcome to the lions, Christians. That happens. I'm sorry. And it might happen to you. I don't think it will in most cases, but it's going to happen to someone, and that someone might be you. But you stand up, you get killed, but she doesn't get raped. Is that worth it? Because and from my perspective, it is. Like, I'm okay with that outcome, because then everybody sees somebody courageous. And maybe the next time it happens, they remember that courage and they embody it. Maybe not, but I think on average, that is the way it works. We see good things and that makes us do good things.
Yeah, no, that situation's outrageous. I can't, when I hear that, I think, what the fuck, man? Like, are you kidding? Like, there's nobody on there that was willing to do something? Are you kidding me? Like, seriously? I just heard a story today. I was looking in Tokyo. I think on Halloween in Tokyo, some dude in a Joker mask stabbed like 17 people and started a fire on a train. Like, what the hell, dude? Like, it's outrageous. And so, yeah, I understand. I understand the need for this.
Yeah, that it takes courage.
But I also understand that the wrestling with it for me is, man, it's just, it can get out of hand quickly.
Well,
that's the issue.
I think part of it. So I was talking to Cassidy last night on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, interestingly, and I don't get to talk to her very much. So, she's super smart, and she really has thought about this stuff very deeply, far more deeply than most people probably realize. We had it was absolutely wonderful conversation. I learned so much from listening to her story and what she had been struggling with, and she was talking about this idea that one of the problems she was seeing, and I'm not saying this is the case, To the extent I can attack Protestantism and do on a regular basis, yeah. But this isn't an attack on Protestantism. It's an observation by someone else, right? She was saying the focus for Protestants is grace. But the problem is they stop there. They think, oh, just grace. It's done. We got enough grace, problem solved. And for her, it wasn't enough. And she knew this. She's like, no, I need to go deeper. And she used the word deeper. And I was like, oh, that's so smart. That's so smart. That's so what it is. There's a deeper way. There's a deeper level of Christianity that Protestantism doesn't give you access to, maybe, right? At least from her perspective. And she said, but she found that in Orthodoxy. And she suspected it was also deeper in Catholicism. And of course, she's Orthodox now. So she thinks Orthodox has the deepest. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And she was very fair to the Catholics, saying, oh, maybe the Catholics have something deeper. I don't know. But for me, Orthodoxy was it, with all the symbols and signs and, all this in your face iconography that's very important. And for our theory that we did on Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server, that's what it is. It's the symbolism is the key. That's the thing that people are missing. And when you're missing that symbolism, you're missing the ability to navigate connections and relationships and intimacy. And so there's no courage in grace. Grace takes no courage effectively, because you already have it. And the grace was given to you. So you're just kind of passing it on. Right? Courage takes a sacrifice, or a potential sacrifice. It takes a loss. And it could be a loss of status. It could be a loss of your life. I don't know. But Christians are for lions. So get over it.
Yeah. I mean, and like that, I don't really know what you're saying when you say Christians are for lions. But because to me, I think, and there's something too that you mentioned living hidden. And I don't know if you've ever seen this film. It's called A Hidden Life. I don't know if you ever saw that.
No.
Have you? No, it's really great. There's, I don't want to give any spoilers, but so I'm going to give you one little spoiler. There's a scene in there. No, this is something that actually happened. It takes place in World War II. I think the guy was Belgium, or I don't know. He's German. He was recruited, or he got drafted into to be a military officer, and he was wrestling with this. He had a wife and a couple of kids. He was in a very small farming community up in the hills, like really small, like no money, nothing like that. And he decided that I don't even know if he decided it, because I think that would be selling it short, because some of this stuff is mystical, man. Like some of these things that are placed upon our hearts, like you can't, like I didn't think my way into that happened to him, right? So it was placed upon him that, and he really wrestled with it. I think he really didn't want to believe what was placed upon him, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't become a Nazi. He just couldn't do it. And so what ends up happening, there's this scene where they're saying, all you got to do, just sign the paper and say that you comply and you'll be fine. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And he knows he's going to get killed. Okay, so there's this scene in there where this higher up Nazi guy is sitting across the table from him, and he's saying, and he asks him this question. He says, now this is the spoiler, so if you want to skip forward, okay, and when I'm done, I'll do this, so then you can press play again. Okay, so in the scene, the Nazi asks him, do you think that Hitler is evil or something like this? And he says, no, I just can't do it. I can't do it. This is a conviction inside of me. It has nothing to do with him. This is up to him, but for me, I can't do it. And then the guy asks him, well, do you think I'm evil? He said, no, this is something that I can't do. My heart won't allow me to go through and move forward and be this Nazi. And right after that scene, he leaves. This is a Terrence Malick film. it's a great film. So he leaves this conscientious objector. I think he was Catholic. He leaves, and this other Nazi gets up from the table, goes around the other side, and he sits in the chair where he's sitting, and he's like imagining himself what it's like to be this guy who's objecting, and he's weeping. And I'm just like, this is so powerful, man. To me, that's living hidden, right? Because it's up. It's like this. It's just, it was, when I seen that, I was blown away. Like the dignity. Now this guy's about to go to the gallows, and he's got 3 kids and a wife, and they can't even, and they're in the community getting shit on because he's objecting. Like that's okay. So that's being thrown to the lions. I agree.
Right.
But that's, again, I don't think he didn't decide to do that. This was something that's placed on him. So that's what I mean about this stuff. It's like, it's tricky, man, because you can't just
sacrifice.
Say, yeah, you can't just willy-nilly go out there and start doing stuff that's not meaningful. I mean, if it's really meaningful, I don't think you're going to have much say about it, right? Because you're, I mean,
well, this is the thing, though, right? So you can only look out, right? So you outsource your sanity to other people. If other people aren't giving you signals, you're going insane. And so if you're not giving people signals about what's bad and what's good, you're contributing to the insanity around you by not speaking. That's true. That's what's happening. And
right.
I recently went to, my uncle passed away, my crazy uncle. So I lost my gardeners because now my aunt's alone and she can't come down and with the trailer and help out anymore, which is very sad for me in many ways, because she's one of my good relatives. I only got a couple. So after the funeral, after the burial, we went back to her place, and I said very loudly, like, I'm going to say a bunch of stuff that is true, that I can prove is true, that I know to be true, that is true. And I said, if you don't like it, bring a gun, shoot first, don't miss. Very clear statement. Like, you can come after me, but you better be prepared to kill me, because if you come after me, I will kill you, because I assume you're coming after me to kill me, right? Which is to say, I'm going to say a bunch of stuff, and I don't care if you don't like it. I'm not interested in your opinion about it, but I'm going to speak it because I have the right to speak it. And it's important that people hear it, even if they don't listen, right? Because it's still a good signal, right? It may be a signal about a bad thing, right? Or about an incorrect thing or whatever, but it's a good signal to have. And it's important that people have those signals, because if you're not putting out those signals, right? And he was, because like he's away from home and he's getting hung, and right, there's all signals there, right? If you're not putting out those signals, you're contributing to the insanity of society. I mean that literally. That is absolutely the way it works. And I disagree. I don't believe you can sit back and contribute to the insanity of society. And the Christian ethos isn't all grace, it's sacrifice. And if the sacrifice is you go to the lions, then that's the sacrifice. And I'm sorry, but you signed up for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. No, this isn't a walk in the park. It's not just grace. Grace is, I 100% agree. I believe, and I believe AA did this to me. Really, it's the embodiment of the pragmatic approach that walks me through self-sacrifice on a daily basis to the best I can. For me, that came first, right? And then grace. Well, grace was there, but then grace grew even more since then. But yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah.
Well, you come in through AA, right? If you come in through AA, you come in through courage,
right?
Because courage got basically shoved in your face hard, right? Like either you hit bottom or you saw bottom coming real quick, and you were like, uh-oh, right? I have no choice. Like, I have to be brave. I have to be courageous. Otherwise, I'm going to fall into a pit or die or both, right? And so, you come in through courage when you come in through AA. You have no choice. So it's already there.
Well, right. I didn't want to go to prison. So, it's a courage, probably more like cowardice, but I also knew listen, I knew like I had done some bad shit to people, and when I got put on probation and I got in jail and all that, I knew I was paying a price, and I thought that the price was like I got like it was totally, I just screwed some shit up. So like I was willing to I don't know if that's courage, but it was truthful. I couldn't hide from the truth. That's one other way of putting it. Like I knew I wasn't going to wiggle my way out of this with myself. Like I might be able to wiggle my way out of it with other folks, but this guy, at some point you reach a point where you just, nope, I can try to tell myself all these lies all day long, but it doesn't work. And it's terrible to try to live that way, man. It becomes painful living the double life like that. So I do have one more question as far as before I get to these little sets of questions. So you have mentioned the being what's the word, subordinate or no,
submitted, right?
Submitted. What would you characterize you as being submitted to?
Well, I think in a sense you have to submit to time, right? Which is submission to change and all the things that come with time. You have to be submitted to your family to some extent, right? Like you have an obligation to the thing that bore you, in essence. And
just hang on. All right, I'm sorry, what are you personally submitted to?
Well, I'm listing the things. I am like time, family, right?
Okay.
Not, which is not just like, I'm not talking to my father. It's not my whole family, right? But it is family, right? So when my uncle passed away, right, they called me up and I said, all right, I'll be there in a couple of days. I'm going to pack and leave tomorrow. And I just left.
Yep.
And it's a long drive from South Carolina to New England. So, that submission, that's like, oh, family in trouble, family need me, go be with family, right? And it's good that I did that, because otherwise a bunch of stuff wouldn't have gotten done. So, that was needed. And then you have to submit to the ineffable, whether that's, the higher power, God, whatever. You have to submit to that, because that's the place from which all virtue, beauty, agape comes, right? Like that's an integral part of the things you interact with on a moment by moment basis. And it's also the place where you get your aspiration. Your aspiration has to come from outside yourself. And in order for that to happen, you have to submit to it. You have to know there's something bigger than me out there that I can embody as an ideal, or attempt to embody as an ideal, that is good. It's good to try and embody. And that's that higher thing. Like you need to be submitted in that way.
So would you say that you're searching for that, or is that something that you found that you just kind of keep into yourself, or you just call it the ineffable? Is it a liquid thing? Is it a scientific definition for you? I don't know. I'm just wondering, because I'm just curious. The
good thing about ineffable is it was come up. We came about using that in place of God to get around using God, because it's not definable. Like it is, like that's built into the definition that it has no baggage. You can't say, oh, I was traumatized by the ineffable when I was young, and that didn't happen, right? So you'd be traumatized by the idea of the ineffable, but whereas people were saying like, oh, God's a bad word, and this is where the Christians fall down, right? They start from certain presuppositions when they're talking to non-Christians. Things like being is good and there is a creator. And when you start there, fair enough, like you should start there, right? But not everybody started there. Not everybody has those conceptions. And they can't, when you start there and you try to talk to even John Vervaeke, you're not going to reach him, because he didn't start there. He's not at creator. He won't admit to creator. He won't admit to anything over himself. If you listen carefully to the Vanderklay Vervaeke talk that came out recently, and I have a big long comment in there you can read. I point out, and this was fascinating for me to notice, John never talked about above. Everything was underneath, below, emergent. It's all from below, as though he's standing on top of everything. And if your presupposition is the Sam Harris presupposition, and if you want to learn more about my thoughts on Sam Harris, Chris Petcow's channel, Sam Harris Brain in a Vat, I think is the name of the video. It's a great video that Chris and I did. Chris is wonderful. He's great. Watch all this stuff. That attitude, that Sam Harris attitude that you're at the top and everything is beneath you is the problem. How do you communicate with somebody with a perspective like that? When your perspective is, I'm subordinate to this higher thing, to this larger frame, to this greater entity, right? It's not God's not a being, fine. God's the entity that created everything.
Right. That's more than just grace.
Right. And it's not a bearded man in the sky, right? So the atheist argument is technically correct. It's just childish. It's childish. Like people, I would listen to these atheists and they'd be constantly going like, well, these people believe in a bearded man in the sky. And they didn't say that, but that's how they acted. So they were using the word technically correctly. But I was like, I've never met anybody like that. I'm not that they don't exist. There are definitely people who maybe can't or won't be able to engage at the level of God is not a bearded man in the sky. Fine, because evolution is real and people have different intelligence and understanding levels and levels of cognition. But most Christians that I ever met don't actually believe that. They believe that God is an entity outside of time and space. Mm-hmm. And that is not a theist. Like they're not theists, because theists believe that God is a bearded man in the sky. And so the atheist argument didn't work because I was like, who are you arguing against? There's no one on the other side of your argument, or a few people, but it's not Christians, not most of them anyway. So, you know, it's important to realize that when someone's making that argument, they're fighting a phantom, right? The atheists are fighting a phantom because they have a belief about your belief that is false. It's demonstrably false. You can demonstrate that it is not the way they believe. And yet that's what Sam Harris is tilting at for a windmill, right? That's what Vervaeke's tilting at for a windmill. And you can hear his thought change, right? You hear him like, oh, these early church fathers were non-theists. Well, that should tell you something about the early church, huh? But can't make the connection.
Again, though, some of this stuff, though, man, because I tried to think my way into an understanding. It was only, I don't know how it happened for me. Like the experience that I had, I wasn't looking for it, to be honest. Like what I was looking for was trying to understand what it was that people understood about this that made it make sense to them, right? Because I wasn't looking to try to exactly, I don't know how to explain it, but so I started looking, and then like against my own, my will, basically, I guess, like it was placed upon me in a way. I like to say I was captured by Christ. I don't even know what that means exactly, other than to say I wasn't trying to do that. Like all of a sudden, boom, there I am. It's like, whoa. So like, yeah, I mean, a guy like these guys, they're trying to, you know, logic their way into it. It's like, good luck, or logic their way out of it. It's like I don't understand. This is like some of the theological stuff. It is a personal thing. This is a personal, experiential, beyond definition, beyond words thing. I mean, this is why poetry does it well, because it, like, to me, the poetry anyways that I'm trying to write, I'm trying to see something that's trying to be seen inside of me. And so I'm just jotting down stuff in a way that I'm hoping is beautiful. It feels beautiful when it's being created. And I'm able to see something that I still can't articulate. And that's wonderful. And so, the logical, rational approach to to understanding God. I mean, I tried that in AA for, the God of my understanding was, it said, God could and would if you were sought. So basically all that's saying is go out, take these steps, go out there, be useful, and try and keep your eyes and ears open for what it is that God, whatever that may be, is trying to show you. And all of a sudden stuff starts popping up. Bloop, 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 bloop. And so I still probably could use a little bit of nudge from the folks over in AA, like, hey, can you guys show us what you're doing over there in AA? Because I think what you're doing is a very pragmatic approach to cleaning up the past and seeing who you are, calling out the evil in oneself, and then trying to be useful to others. And then God will definitely take the seed and set it ablaze, and boom, then your life starts to grow in a way that you could never imagine. But so yeah, I was just trying to, I really wanted to know kind of what it was that you believe. I know it's a personal thing, and I don't want to push it too hard on it. I wonder because, you say, like the Christians, you have to do this. And I think, yeah, I mean, but you could be useful there too. I don't know, and you say you go to church now and again, right?
Well, I'll go with people if they invite me, sort of a thing, because it's a politeness thing in New England, right? Which like, absolutely, right? You always say yes, and like everybody who's given me a Bible, I have all those Bibles, right? Because they're sacred books, and you would never get rid of them, right? Because they're gifts, right? So
you ever study that? Do you ever study those books just for curiosity purposes?
No, I generally don't. I have a book that my aunt sent me, actually, that I'm reading now, because it's a daily, it's a thing to read every day, sort of thing, for every day of the year. So I've been doing that, and it's not just biblical verses. It's called from different parts of the Bible. It's reinterpretation, roughly speaking.
Sure. Yeah, I have something like that. My father-in-law gave it to me. It's from like 1940 or 40 something. It's called Meditations for Men. There is some biblical stuff in there, but there's also poems and stuff in there. It's quite good, actually. I don't know who the author is of it, but it's pretty good. But well, I don't know. Do you want me to ask you? Can I ask you a couple more of these questions here, or you want to wrap up, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, let me just riff a little bit on what you just said, because you touched on a couple of important things, and then we can get right to your list. That would be fine. I think that this idea of personal connection is the thing, right? So that goes back to intimacy for me. The Sam Harrises of the world, and even the Petersons and the Vervekis, they don't have or want or see the need for a personal connection, because objectivity exists for them. Like I argue, the objective material reality, which is what they're actually talking about, doesn't exist. There is no objectivity. Or you can make objectivity happen, but there's only one way to do that. And that is there's a creator with an objective third-party view, right? And so the only way there's objectivity is if there's an observer to make things objective. Now you're back to God. So, and they don't want to submit, right? So they won't, and that's why they try to do the impersonal, logical, rational, reasonable way to get all the things that religion has without actually having religion, because they don't want to submit, and they believe in objectivity. That's how they're getting around submission. Oh, this stuff is all just there. It's like, well, it had to come from somewhere, right? So it really doesn't work, but they think it works. And that's why it's this lack of intimacy. It's this discomfort with having personal connections, like as a thing, any kind of proper, intimate, deep personal connections. That's where I think the core problem lies. Like that is what thing that's causing the meaning crisis to a large extent. So I like that you put the idea of it's not personal, right? You need to make it personal, and then everything happens, because to Jonathan Peugeot's point, your attention changes, right? And you can shift your attention based on that personal relationship. And it's that shift in attention and that personal relationship that gives you the strength and the ability to see, and the strength to go through transformation. And that was the thing that Vervaeke was very much missing in his last talk with Paul, was how do you get to transformation? Because you need a place to do it. You need a reason to do it. You need a way to measure it, right? And you need support while you're doing it, because you're going from having mode to being mode to becoming. And becoming is a big deal because you have to destroy the world you live in today in order to see the world you're going to be in tomorrow. And there's a transition there. And if you don't have a community behind you, maybe you can't make that passage safely.
Well, right. Well, I mean, he did say that his submission is really to the non-theist community, I think is what he said, or something like this. Basically, like his loyalties are to them. And so I think that's could be potentially blocking him. But the other aspect of it, though, I'm hearing him and Paul talking like, man, he's so close. If he's not careful, he's going to trip over that line, and he's not even going to know what happened. Because, like, and I think that's pretty cool. Because I mean, you don't talk that close to it without really. I mean, you can only take the intellectual part of that so far before it nabs you up. Next thing you know, you're being eaten by lions.
I liked your analogy before. How's he not on the other side of the glass? Yeah, exactly. Good question.
So, but maybe he is, and he's just wrestling with that in private. Who knows? I don't know, because he's close, man. He's getting there. But this is all good stuff. I don't know. So I had this project I wanted to do in the future. I'm not sure if I will exactly do it or not, but
you're cloudy, literally.
Yeah, that was my wife just called. Everything good, honey? Oh, she must be at the meeting. Okay, so sorry about yelling. So this project I have, this idea is basically I'd like to be able to eventually put together a project where kind of like a documentary format, but I want to interview people who are in this community, who have channels, who are having discussions like this. But I want it to be more of a personal documentary of people in there, kind of like what we did here a little bit today, I want to know more about Mark, not necessarily Mark's ideas. Like, I want to know who Mark is. I want to hear his story, like, because we get to hear our ideas so much, and like all the folks that are on this channel and Rango's, we hear so many of their ideas. I want to hear about their lives. So this documentary idea, it may or may not happen. I hope it does, or maybe it'll be a series or something. But I think I would like to call it something like This Corner of the Internet. You know, like, what is this? What are we doing here? And I know it should go unnamed yet, but estuary seems to be the closest thing. But it's cool, man. It's cool to see this thing start to bubble up and take shape, and there's an excitement about it that's pretty great. So these questions are things that just came to mind, and so I'm going to shoot them. They can be quick answers if you want. If not, that's fine. So, number one, what do you hope to find?
Oh, I hope to find a way to help people, to find their meaning, to co-create their meaning with the world.
Okay. Number two, what's the most consistent question you have?
Well, it's how best to be of service to those most in need.
Okay. Number three, what do you think this corner of the internet is?
I think this corner of the internet is an exploration into the topic of meaning as such, and its relationship, which strays inevitably into the relationship with religion as such.
Okay. Number four, have you found some relief?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been able to help people, and that relieves me, because then I know there's one less person in trouble.
Okay. Number five was, what is God? But we already kind of covered that, and who the hell knows anyways. So number 6, are we making a change?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can see it's not just a change for the people, we'll say, directly involved either. You can see changes rippling out. You can hear some of the same phrases and themes that we've come up with rippling out in other platforms and other parts of the internet.
Cool. Okay. Okay, number 7, if it all ended in 10 minutes from now, what would you wish to say?
Treat each other with the infinite love that you're going to need to treat each other with 10 minutes from now.
Okay. Okay. Number 8, what is heaven?
Oh, all I got is songs going through my head. Heaven is a place on earth, you know.
What?
I don't know what would constitute heaven even for me. I do the best I can in the here and now, and the rest is going to take care of itself.
Sure. Okay. Then conversely, what is hell? These are tough questions, I know.
Well, to some extent, hell is other people. I was like that saying. No, I mean, hell is living in a world where people are so disconnected from one another that terrible things happen and no one does anything.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Number 10, what are you up to? You've already said, so this is kind of a bad question, I guess.
No, that's okay. It's a perfectly good question. It's nice to have it in this format. What I'm up to is trying to build tools and structures so that people can be helped out of their meaning crisis.
Yeah. 11, if you could say something to your enemy or those opposed to you, what would it be?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I just jotted these down literally like 2 weeks ago in like
That's
5
okay.
minutes. Are you? Oh, number 12. How are you failing?
Well, how much time do we have? My constant struggle is getting an articulation to people that they can grasp so that they can understand what it is that I'm actually talking about, because I find that when I'm clear to people, they don't disagree, right? And so that means I'm failing to communicate clearly, and that's really my biggest struggle.
Okay. And the last question, number 13. If you had one wish, what would it be?
I guess I wish everybody would understand that life is struggle, that suffering is inevitable, but struggle can be turned into joy or suffering.
Great. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and with me this evening. And it was. Do you have anything else you'd like to go over?
No, I don't think so, Chad. I did want to thank you for setting this up and coming up with this idea and taking the time to do this. You made time out of your busy schedule, so I appreciate that. I'm always happy to talk to people who want to talk to me because they think I have something that is important or valuable to them or to others, and so I'm always grateful for the opportunity to have a conversation like this.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to get to know you a little bit and understand you, and I'll see you around.
Yeah. That's great. Have a good night, Chad.
Have a good one.